All right, let's get into it. When we think of the Victorian era, our minds usually jump to those elaborate dresses, the impossibly tiny waists, and that super rigid formal society. But here's the thing, that clothing was so much more than just what people wore. It was basically a roadmap to the entire society's values, its hopes, and maybe most importantly, its restrictions, especially on women. So today we're going to unlace that whole story. I mean, just look at this. This was the dream. A silk taffeta dress from the 1880s. And yeah, it's beautiful, no question. It's incredibly detailed, clearly expensive, and all designed to create this very specific, dramatic shape. But now, try to imagine doing, well, anything in it. The bodice, that's the top part, was so stiff and tight, and then you have that massive bustle in the back. This was never clothing made for living your life. It was clothing made to be looked at. And this quote from the historian Evelyn Ackerman just hits the nail on the head. This kind of fashion wasn't an accident. It was sending a very clear message. It was designed on purpose to signal dependence and helplessness. A woman not being able to move around easily wasn't some design flaw. That was the whole point. And that right there, that sets up the big conflict we're talking about today. The huge battle between fashion as a symbol and this growing, desperate need for function. So you have to ask, how did this idea of helplessness get so fashionable? Well, it was all about social control. It was about reinforcing a very specific role for women in a world that was changing incredibly fast. It was, in a lot of ways, the era of the gilded cage. Okay, so here's the crucial part. For the new money, the guys who got rich in the Industrial Revolution, his wife's clothing was the ultimate status symbol. Her ridiculously impractical dress was like a walking billboard that just screamed, "My husband is so successful that I don't have to do a single thing." Her confinement was basically his trophy. Her place was supposed to be in the home, and her clothes made sure she couldn't get very far. And at the absolute center of this gilded cage, I mean literally, was the corset. Now, this was not just underwear, no way. It was more like an architectural device. Its entire purpose was to physically mold a woman's body into that fashionable ideal, that crazy hourglass shape with a waist that was just shockingly small. It was everything. But getting that look came at a pretty terrifying cost. I want you to look really closely at this medical illustration, because what you're seeing, it's not some artist's exaggeration. This is a real drawing from the time. On the left, you've got a normal rib cage, and on the right, one that's been permanently bent out of shape by years and years of tight lacing. This wasn't just about being uncomfortable. We're talking about lasting physical damage, organs getting compressed, people having trouble breathing. Fainting was just a normal part of the day. And it's not like people didn't know this was happening. It wasn't a secret. Here's a quote from a doctor at the time, Dr. Caroline Hastings, and she doesn't mince words. She called the corset an instrument of human torture. I mean, when actual medical doctors are using language like that to describe a piece of clothing, you know you've got a real crisis on your hands. And you know a pushback is coming. And that pushback, well, it came from two really powerful directions that started to take apart that gilded cage piece by piece. First, you had this incredible wave of new technology and business. And second, you had a total revolution in how people thought about health and a woman's role in the world. Let's just pause on this timeline for a second, because the speed of change here is just staggering. It all kicks off in the 1840s when the sewing machine is invented. Just 10 years later, boom, the first department stores show up. By the 1860s, that sewing machine isn't just a prototype. It's a mass-produced thing people have in their homes. And then the business side just explodes. You get international fashion magazines like Harper's Bazaar, mail-order catalogs from Montgomery Ward. The entire system for a fashion revolution was basically built in the span of about 30 years. It's wild. And this ad just nails it. Companies like Singer marketed these sewing machines directly to women at home. And this little machine, it was a revolution. It gave women the power to make their own clothes, way faster and cheaper than ever before. It totally broke the stranglehold that expensive, high-end designers had on fashion. At the exact same time, there was this huge shift in ideas happening. Doctors, reformers, early feminists, they all started getting organized. They created groups like the Rational Dress Society, and their argument was that clothing should be about health and comfort first. They went after the corset for crushing people's organs. They complained about the insane weight of all those layers of petticoats, and they started promoting new, hygienic materials like wool knits that were warm but also flexible. Their whole motto was simple, but for the time, it was totally revolutionary. health, comfort, and beauty. Okay, so you've got new technology making different kinds of clothes possible, and you've got reformers arguing that these new clothes are absolutely necessary for people's health. But a good argument, even a brilliant one, doesn't change closets overnight. What they needed was a practical reason, a catalyst that would literally force women out of their corsets and into something new. And that catalyst was the sudden, massive craze for outdoor sports. So, early on, you had things like ice skating. It was a perfectly respectable way for men and women to hang out together, and you just couldn't skate safely if your skirt was dragging on the ice. So, what happened? Skirts got just a little bit shorter. It seems like a tiny thing, but it was a crack in the armor of that super restrictive fashion. And then came tennis. It was way more active, much more demanding. And in 1879, a brand new material showed up in tennis dresses, jersey fabric. Just think about that for a second. A stretchy, knitted fabric. For the first time, a piece of women's clothing was designed with elasticity, with actual movement in mind. This was a complete and total game changer. But the real disruptor, the one machine that just shattered all the old-fashioned rules for good, was the bicycle. All of a sudden, women could go places on their own like never before. But trying to ride a bike with those long skirts wasn't just awkward, it was incredibly dangerous. The fabric would get caught in the chains, in the wheels. It was a disaster. So this forced a truly radical change, the shorter, divided, or bifurcated skirt. People were shocked, but it was necessary. Function had finally, decisively won a major battle against form. Now, it would be really easy to wrap this up by saying that sportswear won, and everyone lived happily ever after in comfortable clothes. But the truth is, as always, a lot more complicated. The revolution was messy, and honestly, in a lot of ways, it's still not finished. What is so fascinating about the end of the 19th century is that fashion had this complete split personality, which you can see perfectly right here. In the sportswear column on the left, you see all this practical progress, shorter skirts, tailored jackets that you can actually move your arms in. But then look at the high fashion column on the right. At the very same time, formal fashion was doubling down. The bustle came back even bigger, sleeves exploded into these gigantic leg of mutton puffs, and a new, even more extreme corset created this S-curve shape. It was a real tug of war, a battle of ideals being fought with fabric. But out of that conflict, something new and really powerful started to emerge. Take a look at this three-piece tweed suit from 1895. You've got a simple skirt, a tailored jacket, and a basic blouse. It's practical, it's versatile, and it comes directly from the kinds of fabrics and styles people were wearing for country sports. This right here, this is the direct ancestor of the modern woman's suit. This is what the future looked like. Which, of course, leaves us with one last big question to think about. Was the rise of sportswear the true beginning of modern, functional clothing for women? Or was it just one battle in a much longer war between the demands of fashion and the needs of the women who have to wear it? A tension that, let's be honest, we still see playing out on runways and in our own closets to this day.